Hello everyone, Storm 11 here. Today, we're going to have a big tropics update here. We got major Hurricane Fiona that could become a historic storm for Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, Canada. We also are paying very close attention to Tropical Depression 9, which will likely bring some impacts somewhere in the United States. We don't know exactly where just yet, but areas like Cuba and also Florida as well could see some significant impacts out of that system as well. And I'll also talk about why I've been gone for so long. I've been gone for at least 2 months. We'll talk about that toward at the end of the video. But let's first get into the tropics. And we're looking to satellite imagery here, or infrared satellite. And we got four different tropical systems. We got Major Hurricane Fiona. Yeah, it is still a Category 3 hurricane out there. And you can see here where the storm is going to. It's heading up towards Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and that's expected to bring some catastrophic impacts. You're talking about sustained winds that could be up to 120 miles per hour in some places, a lot of rainfall, and significant storm surge as well. And this storm has the potential to become historic for these areas as well. And this storm could drop a pressure that could be as low as in the 920s or the 930s as well. And that's a pretty impressive storm for those areas as well. And once again, that concern brings some catastrophic impacts as well. And one of the main reasons why that's going to explode so much is because it's merging with a trough here. You can kind of see how this trough goes. It's almost like a bowling ball. Something you kind of see in the wintertime. And usually when you see something like that in the wintertime, you got a big storm just in the northeast of that can usually bring a lot of snow. In this case here we are in the tropics, talking about a kind of like a bowling ball trough, um, phasing with a major hurricane, and that can lead to that could lead to a pretty historic event. We also got Tropical Storm Gaston out here in the northeastern part of the Atlantic. We also got newly formed Tropical Storm Hermine. We thought Tropical Depression 9 will take the name Hermine, but instead, this system out here, just off the west coast of Africa, will actually take the name, which the next name on the list is Ian, which will be more than likely be the next name for Tropical Depression 9. Here's another way to kind of look at everything. Here's her Major Hurricane Fiona with sustained winds up to 125 miles per hour with a central pressure of 940 millibars, and it's definitely been picking up speed. It's now moving north-northeast at 40 miles per hour. Here's Tropical Storm Gadsden with sustained winds of 60 miles per hour with a central pressure of 995 millibars. Here's the newly developed Tropical Storm Hermine that has a maximum sustained wind of 40 miles per hour. Not really an impressive storm, and really not expecting much out of it. But let's also check out the tracks for these storms really quick here. Here's the National Hurricane Center forecast for Major Hurricane Fiona, and you can see here this could this will likely go into extratropical phase as it does phase with that uh, big trough that is out there. And you can see here, look at all those hurricane warnings in red. I mean, you really don't see uh, a hurricane in this part of Canada very often. It's certainly very rare to see that. And you also notice here how widespread this event is. I mean, in blue, those are tropical to storm warnings out there. So you can see here, you also notice here the wind field is also very large out there as well. The yellow is tropical storm, and red, that's hurricane force winds. Even though the winds will slowly back off, the pressure itself will continue to drop as well as it gets closer to Nova Scotia and also Newfoundland, Canada as well. Back this up and check out Gaston. You can see here it's actually going to be moving towards the west here, but you can also see here it's expected to become extratropical as well. And we really don't expect much of anything out of the system here. It is bringing to some impacts for these islands here, which I don't know the name of those, But there are tropical storm warnings for those islands as well, as they do experience some tropical storm-like impacts. But really after that, currently has no threat to land. And then we check out the track for Hermine. You can see here, we're not really expecting much thing out this system here. It's like when they say it's a fifth storm, and it should die out somewhere in the eastern part of the Atlantic. There's a disturbance in the main development region. It's got a low and 30% chance in the next 5 days. We're not really worried about that system. And then we finally get to Tropical Depression 9. This is the next system we're watching or paying attention very closely. Has a sustained winds of 35 miles per hour, so it's almost a tropical storm, which we do expect this system here to become a tropical storm either later tonight or more than likely tomorrow. It's got a central pressure of 1,006 millibars as well. And if we do check out their forecast cone, you can see here where they have this going. So once again, we expect this to become a tropical storm probably as early as either tonight or tomorrow. They are forecasting this to become a hurricane by 2 o'clock in the morning Monday, and it could strengthen into a major hurricane before making landfall somewhere in the peninsula of Florida. Usually in a forecast range like this, usually they could be pretty conservative. Maybe at that range, maybe a Category 2 hurricane be a more conservative way, how they usually are. But with a forecast like this, it's something you don't see very often from the National Hurricane Center. So they got pretty decent confidence that there is going to be a major hurricane somewhere in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And that could get into parts of the western part of the Atlantic, or I should say the east coast of Florida as well. There's still a lot of uncertainty, which we'll talk a little bit more about those scenarios here in a moment. But here's a closer look at Tropical Depression 9 here on infrared satellite imagery. You can also see here your level of circulation is about right here. Let me actually change the color of that so you guys can see a little bit better. But your level of circulation looks to be right here. We will have to pay attention to this cluster of convection that's out here on the western side of the system, because sometimes within that cluster of convection like that, another level of circulation could pop up in there. Sometimes that does happen. But right now, really the western side of the system is where we got the convection at the moment. But we're not really seeing much way of convection on the eastern half of the system. So it still has some time to try to organize. But really at the moment here, beyond this point here, it's got a green light for intensification or strengthening really over the next couple of days. But if we also kind of go back to satellite imagery here, there's another, I almost forgot to mention this earlier, but there's another thing we're watching on infrared satellite imagery here. And we already went for all the tropical systems, but we haven't talked about this low pressure system over the Dakotas. This is another thing we're watching very closely. Why? It's not because it's going to become a tropical system. It's mainly because this trough here could be the main steering mechanism for Tropical Depression 9, which let's explain that right now when we look into the European model at 500 millibars. So as we look on here, here's Fiona right here. Here's your main trough here. And if we go for the next couple of hours or so, kind of goes outside there. But you will notice here, Fiona will merge with this other massive trough that's out there. And that's really going to make the storm much larger, and that's going to bring in some significant impacts. But that trough we're just looking at on infrared satellite imagery is right here. Right now it's a pretty weak trough, but it could deepen as it kind of moves into the eastern U.S. You can see it does gain some strength as well. And really, typically when you have a trough in the eastern U.S., if a tropical system kind of comes from the Atlantic, usually these here can help steer these storms away from the United States. That's exactly what happened with Fiona, which if we go back here a little bit, see this is back on Thursday or yesterday. You can see here's Fiona right here. Here's his trough here. And what typically troughs here, in the upper level winds kind of steer these storms more to the northeast. The ridge is the opposite. Sometimes when you have a ridge, it kind of makes the storms continue to move to the west. So keep in mind that. So Luckily, Fiona won't landfall in the United States. However, it will landfall over the eastern part of Canada. But eventually, at some point here, Tropical Depression 9 should begin to show up. All right, here it is right here. So here we are, Monday night or early Tuesday morning. We got this big trough that's out here in parts of the eastern U.S. That's going to bring in some pretty chilly air for parts of the eastern U.S. Could bring some frost for some areas for the first time this season. Um, but this is something we're really paying attention to. So here's Tropical Depression 9 right here. Here's your trough. So if this trough were to stay stationary right here, this can actually make the storm here have a more eastward turn. But in this case here, you can see here, as the storm kind of gets closer here, the trough begins to weaken a little bit, which will make this trough here more of a less of a steering mechanism. At the same time, we got a ridge of high pressure building off to the west here. You can see here there's some above normal high anomalies across parts of the central and western U.S. That ridge of high pressure could move, you can see here, uh, by Thursday night into early Friday morning. European Mall has Tropical Depression 9 making landfall, or at this point here, it could be a hurricane making landfall in the Carolinas. Now we got a ridge of high pressure building over Canada, which it can make this thing steer a little bit more farther to the west at this point. But really, what the European Mall likes to do is kind of take in more of a northern direction as well. But that's just solution number one. Let's check out the GFS model. So you can see here that trough really deepens here across the eastern U.S. But once again, you notice here comes Tropical Depression 9, which really at this point here, this will be Hurricane Ian. And you can see here, you got this big trough that's out here, but usually sometimes the GFS has a progression bias that makes things go by a little quick here. But you notice here, the GFS has this mainly staying in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. At the same time, this trough here is now beginning to move off farther to the northeast, so it's moving a little bit quicker. And if that comes true, if this trough up here in the northeast moves a little bit quicker, basically it misses this tropical system here, which will make it go in a more westward direction here. And then, as that trough begins to move away here it is still in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. This is 18Z on Thursday. You can see here at the European Mall at the same time. Here's your tropical system just off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, or off the east coast of Georgia. You can see here, both of these models here show a different solution here. But the main difference here is that the European model has this trough here moving much slower here. Meanwhile, the GFS model has the trough moving out here a little bit quicker. And that's while we're watching this trough very closely here, because this can change the direction for the system here. Or change the track, I should say. You can see here as we move on to Friday here, makes landfall in the panhandle of Florida here, and you got that rich high pressure that does continue to build over the northeast, and that will continue to make this tropical system stay in the southeast as well. So really, overall, the European Model GFS, they both agree on a hurricane, but the track of the system is where we have the highest uncertainty with that system as well. But let's check out some other things like wind shear. What does wind shear look like ahead of Tropical Depression 9? Well, this is by 12Z on Monday or Monday morning. There really isn't a whole lot of wind shear out there, really, until you get to the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico area. We got a lot of wind shear going on up there. Even though there's some wind shear out here, but if you pay attention to those lines and arrows, you can see here, this is actually an indication of a lot of outflow in the upper levels. And typically when you got this much outflow in the upper levels with tropical systems, this can actually lead to rapid intensification. So really in reality, even though this model shows some wind shear out there, really in reality there's very little wind shear out there. So this system here won't have a problem when it comes to wind shear. Really the only problem when it has to deal with wind shear is whenever it gets into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. You can see here to the north and west of the system, there's a lot of wind shear. That's what that red indicates. With that red, there's extreme wind shear out there, or very high wind shear values out there. Still a pretty strong system though, 937 millibar low showing from the GFS at this point. So you still have a pretty strong system here. And if this comes true here, if that wind shear really kicks in the gear, this can actually help shear the storm here apart, and that can actually weaken before making landfall out there as well. So really, whenever the system here gets to the eastern Gulf of Mexico, that's when this system here could experience wind shear issues, but that can easily change. But really, over the next couple of days, really through the Caribbean, there's pretty much no wind shear out there. So, and that can cause problems out there. That can lead to some intensification. How about dry air? Is there any dry air out there? Yeah, there's some dry air out there, but there's not really a whole lot of dry air. That's one of the problems here. Whenever the system really gets going, it's got a nice large moisture shield to really keep all this dry air away from the system here. So I don't think this system really has to deal with dry air issues really until it kind of gets into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But even whenever it interacts with that dry air, you notice there a lot of that dry air is not really getting into the system, which if this storm system were able to keep its close to low, it can still maintain strength very well. So there's still a lot of uncertainty whenever it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, not only the track, but with the wind shear and dry air factors. This can still weaken the system. But on the other hand, if we check out analysis tools here and actually check out those sea surface temperatures, you can see here we got sea surface temperatures that are in the upper 20s to low 30s. By the way, this is in Celsius, not in Fahrenheit. You got temperatures that's up to 30 and 31 degrees Celsius. That's pretty much bathwater. And this will also help really increase the chances for rapid intensification, especially in this part of the Caribbean. And there's another thing, and that will be ocean heat content. Here we go. And if you actually look into ocean heat content, also in the northwestern part of the Caribbean, it's actually very high. That's also going to really help increase the chances for rapid intensification. So really, whenever Tropical Depression 9 gets into the northwestern part of the Caribbean, we could potentially see rapid intensification at that point. I think it's definitely a possibility we could see some rapid intensification. But uncertainty really increases as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico region or around Florida, where there is some wind shear and also some dry air that the system could deal with. And that could help keep the system more tamed than out of control, like it would be uh, in the Northwestern Caribbean. Really, in the Northwestern Caribbean, conditions are just prime for a major hurricane in that area. You got very high ocean heat content values, very warm sea surface temperatures, very little to no wind shear, and not much wave dry air whatsoever. Wherever it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, okay, those ocean heat content values do begin to back off, but still favorable. Still have very warm sea surface temperatures. However, there could still be some wind shear and some dry air. There's still plenty of time for changes when it gets to the Gulf of Mexico, and that's why we need to pay attention to trends out there. And the other big thing we're watching for is that trough that's currently over the Dakotas out there as well. Depending on the speed of that trough, can really depend on the track or the future path of what will be the future of Hurricane Ian. So that'd be another thing to watch for as well. And the last thing we'll take a look into is the hurricane models. And the hurricane models do a really good job when it comes to the track of the system. You can see here on the 18Z update of the hurricane models, there's a pretty decent agreement here with it. Still a decent spread in the guidance here, but pretty much all of them have it taking it through western Cuba and eventually going into the Florida Peninsula. Once again, there's still plenty of time for changes. It's still several days out. But really, if you're watching from Florida and even into like Georgia and the Carolinas as well, you also need to keep an eye on the storm system as well. But the area I'll be most concerned with right now will probably be the peninsula of Florida. And what's very interesting about the track of this system could be very similar to the track of Hurricane Charley from back in 2004, which unfortunately brought significant impacts to the peninsula of Florida. Hopefully that does not happen, but unfortunately that could happen, and it could be similar to Charley as well. But hopefully that won't be the case. But once again, there's still plenty of time for changes as well. And another thing I almost forgot to show you guys is the intensity guidance. And really, you could take some of these models as a grain of salt, but the majority of the models do take this thing here into at least Category 2 strength, and even several of them take into a major hurricane or Category 3 hurricane as well. And once again, there's still a chance this thing could rapidly intensify. So some of these models could underestimate the intensity of that storm as well. So once again, if you live in Florida, definitely pay attention to the system very closely. Now, before I end this video, so a lot of you guys will probably be asking why I have not been uploading anything for the past 2 to 3 months. Well, really since mid-May, I've been working in a factory. I got a new job. I've been working in a factory, and for anybody that's worked in a factory before, it can really wear you out depending on what job you have. For my job, there's a lot of physical work that's involved. Plus, it's very boring. I'm gonna be honest with you, the job itself is very boring. I've been trying to get a new job recently, but that's not been working very well for me. So it looks like I'm kind of stuck with the factory job um, for now. But with the factory job, it really drains my motivation. So you can say I've been in a significant burnout for the past 2 3 months, or really through the summer overall. But after getting more used to the job now, I'm starting to get some motivation back to do some of these videos, which is some good news really for anybody um, out there that usually watches my YouTube channel or videos as well. But as my motivations come back, hopefully I can upload some more videos or at least have enough motivation. If you got bad motivation, your videos are not going to be great. But if you got good motivation, your video will likely be much better. So yeah, some of my motivation is coming back, and hopefully I can try to upload more videos over the next couple days and even bring some more updates in the tropics as well. But anyways, guys, this is all good for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Guys, like this video, hit that like button. If you like my channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notifications and never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put a comment section down below. I answer you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.